You have been watching The Point. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, who can you trust? How important is trust in society? Do people trust their government, their media, and why does trust matter? Coming up next. Do you have confidence that leaders can address your country's challenges? Do you think your children will have a better life than you do? These are some of the questions surveyed in the 2020 Trust Barometer by the US-based PR firm Edelman. And for the third time, China has enjoyed the highest average score. Is the finding credible? If so, what can explain the consistent high level of trust the Chinese population has in the system? I'm joined in Beijing via Skype by Ding Yifan, a senior fellow from the Development Research Center of the State Council, and from Memphis, Tennessee in the US, Professor Josef Mahoney from the East China Normal University in Shanghai. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. So just a bit of background to this annual survey, which measures how people trust NGOs, businesses, government, and the media. The respondents are asked to score on 9 statements in 4 dimensions, which are sense of injustice, lack of hope, lack of confidence, or desire for change. It's an internet-based survey, now in its 20th year, and over 34,000 respondents across 28 markets around the world are done, and this is done in an anonymous manner. And this year, the average trust index for China is 82. We have to explain that the respondents are put into 2 categories. One is the so-called informed public, and they gave China a trust in score, let's say, of 90, and the general population, which is 77. The informed public would have certain characteristics, such as a minimum level of college education and age limit, and so on and so forth. So then, respectively, the trust index for China this year is 90, and to break it down, the trust in business is 82, the trust in media is 80, trust in NGO is 84, and trust in the Chinese government, I should say, is 90, which is very high. Now, to denote, to help people understand the founding, Matthew Harrington, who is global president and CEO of Edelman, said, as we've studied, it's been 2 years running that China has had the greatest trust among its population. It shows the understanding of the importance of the central government to advancing society. So let me go to Mr. Ding. Your reaction to the finding of this survey. Is it surprising to you?
Not really surprising, because it's not the first time that an American foreign or investigation institutions carried out such a result about the deep trust of Chinese population in Chinese leaders. For example, Pew Institute is the most famous institute of social investigation, made several investigations around this globe about population's trust in their leadership or in their political system. Almost every time, since more than 10 years, the investigation in China showed that Chinese population has a deep trust in Chinese leadership. The ratio is almost about 85% to 90%. So it's very, very high.
Okay, well, some people have doubts, and some people have been trying to find reasons to solidify, to support their doubt. For instance, some people are saying developing nations have a lower internet penetration rate and in general, so had more trust than developed ones. It is true that China's internet penetration rate is about 60%. Could that be a reason that China's score is so high?
Not really.
Okay.
Not to mention the development of 5G in China. If you take the fiber optic that come into home, the ratio of optic cable going into home in China, the ratio is something like 80%, while the proportion in the United States is only 10%. So you cannot think that China, in terms of telecommunication equipment, in terms of the kind of access to internet, China is lower than any country in the world. So it's no reason
Okay.
China is maybe still a developing country, but China's access to internet or the use of internet in China among Chinese populations was very high. Why?
Yeah, it's true.
Even
It's true.
in Chinese countryside, people can sell their product by internet to the US market, to the European market.
Okay.
So,
Professor Mahoney, what is your reaction to the finding, and how much do you think these numbers say about the relationship between the government and the general public?
Well, I think in China's case, to echo my colleague's comments in Beijing, as he noted, the Pew Global Survey for many years has indicated that trust in the central government has almost always exceeded 70%, has often hit the mid-80s. I think in the case of China, it's the 90 number is slightly surprising, but it tracks with, you know, a number of programs that we've seen the Chinese government undertake in the last several years, which other parts of the survey indicate are central to driving trust. And these include things like the Revitalize the Countryside campaign, the Alleviate Poverty campaign, the anti-corruption campaign, trying to promote more environmental awareness, environmental justice. So these issues get right to the issue of ethics and competence. Are you know, driving trust in the central government. Now, one of the things that it doesn't mention, this has always been an issue, is, you know, is there a disparity between trust in the local government versus national government? But that remains to be seen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, however, Professor Mahoney, are some of the most important reasons that you can highlight which explain this extraordinary high collaboration, let's say, or trust level between the general public and the central government? You said that the central government has taken a few initiatives, but in general, what do you think are being done by the central, or the relationship maybe is different between the central government and the general public than in the Western society that people simply just do not understand by now?
Well, I think there are two sides, right? The first is the number of efforts or what I mentioned a moment ago, the Revitalize the Countryside campaign. That speaks to regional disparity. Alleviate poverty, that speaks to income inequality. Corruption, anti-corruption, that's about restoring trust. Environmental justice is an issue that's on a lot of people's minds, and we've seen significant improvements in Beijing, Shanghai, and other areas in recent years that really make clear differences in the minds of people. But in places like the United States and the UK and other places, what we've seen is a radical, long-standing problems with partisanship, but increases in partisanship. We see these efforts that are really, you know, promoting distrust. We see national leaders from separate parties. Donald Trump called Nancy Pelosi incompetent the other day. She's a third-ranking member of government according to the Constitution. We see breakdowns in efforts to deal with global warming. We see the proliferation of fake news. We see different media accusing each other of being disseminators of fake news. We see political leaders doing the same.
Indeed.
So all of this has been eroding trust in these countries, while in China there have been things that have been increasing it.
Indeed, according to the finding, 12 of the 26 markets are distrusters, as has been called by the results. For instance, 2/3 of the people in those markets, mostly developed countries, they do not have confidence that our current leaders will be able to successfully address our country's challenges. But Mr. Ding, let me ask you this. There are people who are saying, look, the internet is controlled in China, or that the Chinese people really don't have any other experience than the communist experience. So basically, if you haven't tasted sugar, you don't know, how sweet it is until you know it. Would that explain why the Chinese people are trusting in the system so much?
No, you can know how many Chinese people can have access to international internet. They have different ways to bypass the so-called firewall or something like that. So it's not really a reason how Chinese people cannot have access to information through the internet. No, it's not the real reason about this.
I
think that.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yes, Chinese people, or Chinese public authorities think that the internet is full of all kinds of biased information or fake news or something like that. So we have to make some selection of these. That's why up until now, the firewall is still considered as a necessary instrument to keep sort of safety of telecommunication in China. I don't know. Maybe one day, if technically speaking, Chinese engineers in telecommunication will become sufficient or competent enough, they will be probably liberalized.
One of the things that the report or the finding was suggesting to improve people's trust in the media is exactly to clean up the social media scope so that there is less rubbish, let's say, or bad quality information on the social media. But I do want to go to Professor Mahoney for my last question. Could there be a downside of having too much trust in the system? Could there be a burden of responsibility that is too high? Professor Mahoney, please keep it short too.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's a fine line. You need to have trust, and governments need to be ethical and competent. But the one thing that I always worry about in the case of China is that the government takes so much responsibility. It takes responsibility for everything ultimately, and it is a very, very heavy burden. I have a lot of friends who work in government, and they have very difficult lives. It makes it harder to take more and more responsibility for people's issues. People need to be able to take more responsibility for themselves. So that's one potential downside.
Well, there is a very different culture or different traditional relationship between the general public and the officialdom, let's say. In Chinese or in traditional Chinese history, the officials are considered parent, right, kind of to the general public, 父母官. Anyway, we hope that a fine balance will be able to find in the near future. Many thanks to my guests, Dean Yifan and Joseph Mahoney. With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. We've got The Point.